Raksha Society, the chairman, Ragi Menon, all those people who work at Raksha and the children of Raksha for having invited me here today. Thank you very much for having me at this event. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be here, and to visit Raksha this morning is probably the highlight of the evening, and not my concert or my talk, I assure you. So thank you very much. I will not spend too much time. I promise I'll close in 40 minutes. If I overshoot, please flag me. Just like to address a few themes, a few words in today's conversation with you. We live in times when most things are perceived in binaries. You either have bad people or you have good people. You have people who do good, people who do nothing or bad. I mean, this is how we tend to have most conversations, or tend not to have conversations. And in boxing people in these two very convenient spaces and places, we avoid having any kind of dialogue about ourselves, because we place ourselves in the box which we think is always good. Nobody is going to place themselves in a box that says I'm a horrible person. Nobody's going to do that. So instead of doing that, if you are going to start with the assumption, the good assumption, that intentions of most people is generally to be decent, to do the decent thing. Whatever that means. I'm not going to go into the crevices of what is decency, but let's presume that's the general way in that normal people would like to be. They would like to do the good thing, they would like to be helpful, they would like to, of course, advance their lives, but at the same time do, within quotes, some amount of good. With that presumption, and I think that's a fair presumption, what is the things that we all miss as human beings, despite this very, very nice nature? And it probably begins with the fact that every one of us come with limitations as people. The limitations are based on where we were born, what our environment was, what our parents told us, what our friends told us, who our friends were, what was the society around our home, our school, which school did we go to, where did we educate ourselves in college, and what you would call different kinds of exposures. That, to a large extent, is going to choreograph who you are, how you think, how you receive, how you reject. And these are habits that we are all picking up. We are all picking up. I am picking it up today as I speak to you. It's not like it stops after college education. It doesn't stop. These are habits that we pick up. And within these habits, there are limitations. Things that we are not able to see. Things that we don't even notice exist. Or things that we brush aside. Not because we are purposely doing it, but it's just that it doesn't pop up. I'll use an analogy, which I think is appropriate, which is Oscar Wilde, and I love this little part of an essay that he wrote. And in that essay, most people will tell you art, for example, imitates nature. What is there is what art is. So Oscar Wilde does something quite contrary. He says, no, nature imitates art. And the first time I read it, I was flummoxed. I said, how can nature imitate art? It doesn't make any sense. But then let's think of it this way. Say every morning you come to your balcony or garden or wherever, and you have a cup of coffee or tea. In front of you are plants, there are flowers, and you're probably seeing parts of it. You're probably not even noticing it after a point. It just happens to be in front of you in your garden, that's all, right? Which of course you notice if you want to tell somebody you have a beautiful garden, but other than that you really don't notice it. And then a child comes to your garden and draws those plants. And that child suddenly draws a frog. Now, you never saw the frog till that moment. But what happens the next morning when you go in for have a cup of coffee? You look for the frog. You didn't see the frog the previous day. You didn't even know it existed. It was there in nature. But that little child, by drawing that frog, actually told you there's a frog. It's an interesting inversion of something that we take for granted. That unless there is sometimes a context or a person who points out to something existing, your limitations and your blinkers don't allow you to. So we carry those baggages with us. But it is not as simple as it is. We also do another very interesting thing. We tend to notice things that are not too uncomfortable for us. And we tend to ignore things that are too close to home. So even in terms of, say, seeing what is in society, or the horrors of society, or the disparities in societies, we will notice some, we will not notice the other. Or we will justify one, we will not justify the other. We will say, no, this is horrible. Full stop. For something else, we will say, this is horrible, but you know, that person also did this. Somewhere we want to find an excuse. And in saying that but, we are protecting something of ourselves. It's not some objective observation of what you see. So even in making an argument for participating in society, we'd like to make a positive argument for things that are far away from home, and a neutral, semi-neutral, maybe even a negative argument if it's too close. If your argument, for example, challenges the way you live your life, if, for example, you notice something that is horrible and you participate in that horror, would we pay attention to it or would we excuse it? That's a tough question to answer. I don't think there's an absolute answer there. Many times we will probably, shall we say, soft pedal it a little bit. Sometimes just refuse to accept that it exists. So there is this constant negotiation that we are doing in terms of even what we see, what we choose not to see, how we want to contribute to society. That very uncomfortable word, but I'm still using it. All this is also a negotiation. It is not some coming from this complete openness. The choices we make in how we contribute to society are also and sometimes based on how limited we are. And in a very convoluted fashion, the privileged have another great ability. We have this ability of turning ourselves into the victim in the process. There'll be something horrible happening out there, but somehow in posing that conversation, in having that debate, suddenly we would be the victim in the entire debate, and the person who is affected is, by the way, this also happens. We have this tremendous capacity of doing that. Right? So the question that I ask myself, and I keep asking myself, is can I be open enough and constantly open enough, not by choice, not by limitation or habit, but very conscious effort. Can I be open enough to be witness to my own fault lines? Can I always be witness to my own fault lines? And that's the difficult question. In today's corporate world, there are two words that seem to be like the catchword: inclusivity and diversity. The corporate world seems to love it. I spoke at one corporate event where it was HR managers who were working with inclusivity and diversity. And while at the face value, of course, we're all glad that that's part of some kind of a discourse. But we should wonder what that discourse also is. We can't just be satisfied with saying, at last people are talking about it, let's just be happy about it. No, but what are they talking about? What are we talking about? I have always been uncomfortable of using that word inclusivity, I personally. Because the first question that bothers me is, who am I to be inclusive? Who am I including? Why am I using that phrasing when I say including? And what does it say about, within quotes, that person or that community or those people who I presume I'm including? Because that word, when it comes out about my mouth, speak for myself, it comes from immense power. I can afford to say I want to be inclusive. And my normal state is then being exclusive. That is also stated, right? So in a way, I am going away from my normal state of just thinking of myself for once and thinking of somebody. So it's almost like I'm doing a favor to people. So I kind of stay away from that word. I like to say non-exclusive in some manner. That still may not be the ideal framing, but I'll stick with it for now. Is, could we have an environment which is not exclusive, where the non-exclusivity is the norm? There is nothing extra special about me. That society itself builds towards being non-exclusive. Now, what would that do to our work? I think it would tremendously change the nature of how we participate in anything that we do. Because the first thing it will do is point to the fact that rather than say that we need to be inclusive, we are correcting ourselves and our nature and our exclusivity as the first point. Rather than saying we're going out there and doing something. But non-exclusivity cannot be only a material conversation. Because often we talk about providing, of course, education, we talk about providing access, we talk about providing tools required to live lives, whether it is Raksha for the children, how do the children become part and participate with equality in society. And I think they will be in a better position than me to tell you that you can provide all these tools, but if the non-material aspect of society does not change, you're still fighting a huge battle. If society doesn't provide an environment, society is you and me, by the way, do not provide an environment that is emotionally and psychologically awakened enough to say that these children are like any other children. That these children need not be, within quotes, if I may use that another very disconcerting word, mainstreamed. So, what I'm saying is that when we want to be non-exclusive, we need to participate not just in material senses, but in the way we behave, the way we see, the way we smile. We smile differently for different people. We don't smile the same way for every person. The way we say hello, these may seem like very small things. Ms. Team Krishna is speaking some abstractions. No. But that is felt by every human being. The othering that comes from not emotionally changing, not psychologically changing, not collectively changing the way we behave in society makes it much harder for people, for diverse children or adults, doesn't matter, to just participate and be who they are. Raksha's children just have to be who they are. We need a society that says we're all who we are, and we must be able to embrace that quality in every individual. So this entire separation between what we do and what we are needs to be smudged. We can't say we work if we work in a certain institution. We can't say yes, inclusivity, diversity, all the catchphrases, make sure you hire the right way, make sure you have the PowerPoint presentation that makes all the right noises, and then when you step out of that little domain, nothing changes. Because the person, everybody notices it, it doesn't go unnoticed. So, I think this takes us to this entire question of why are we participating, or why do we want to participate in this manner? And I say we, it's a very generic we. I'll just say me, maybe. It's easier. And we always talk about, giving back to society. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Maybe we should not even ask that question. Some people say, why are you asking this question? If people are giving, just be happy. At least they're giving. But shouldn't giving itself be questioned of where it is coming from? Shouldn't we question that for ourselves, not for another person? Question giving for ourselves, and I'll come back to giving. So, sometimes I wonder whether a lot of this is also part of our own guilt. Do we participate because we are guilty about whatever privileges that we have? This can be social, can be cultural, can be economic. Does it come from seeing the disparity that we see on the streets or on the road? Where is the centering of that feeling? Where is it centered? And to me, guilt is not a great place to center it. It is not a great place to center it. And I'll tell you why. Because guilt is also about you. Guilt is about you. This is no different from putting money in a hundial in a temple. The action comes from the same point. Should we rethink that point, that origin? Because again, you're participating because you want to feel better about yourself. Whatever that may mean. And I'm not going to go into that. So, I wonder whether this is also something that I need to think about. Why am I participating? Because it cannot be for me driven by guilt. And that is why that word charity is one of those very noisy words. Because it again comes from all these complicated positions that we are discussing. Guilt, power. I am doing something for somebody who has less. All these resonances, I think, have to be thought about when we participate. So, maybe even giving is not the right word. I would prefer the word sharing. That's my personal option. Because sharing does something very interesting. It erases the idea that there is a giver and there's a taker. It also kind of, shall we say, liquefies the ownership of the share. So when you share, it comes from a position of great love, happiness. Even when you share food, see, with a friend, take a simple example of you sharing food with a friend. You don't think about how much you share. You say, this is really nice, just have some. And you just pass it over. And then you just share in the food. And there's something quite beautifully equalizing that happens in the process that neither one of you are noticing. Maybe we should all share. Then we don't own so much. Then we're not coming from guilt. We are coming from the fact that sharing is the normal way to be. Maybe it will take us in a different position in our heart. And it does something for me. And I must tell you, before I came here, I Google searched to see who were the main financial contributors among the millionaires of India. And when I did this, I got a headline which I thought was very interesting. India's most generous was a headline. India's most generous. Now, sharing also challenges another very important hierarchy, and I want to place it here today after going to Raksha this morning, is the fact the person who writes the check or makes the bank transfer cannot be placed at a supremely powerful position as a giver compared to the people who spend days and nights in sharing love and affection with people who need it. You destroy the idea of the giver and make it people who share. There's a hope that we will respect people. Why is the most generous person in India not a person who's volunteered 50 years of their life in an institute, in a place helping people? Why should it be somebody who has a lot of money only? Isn't that framing so unethical? And we have to challenge that frame. We have to challenge that. Because there needs to be equality in this participation too. Nobody is saying anybody is lesser. Of course it's important to contribute in whatever way you contribute. But contributions are different. Again, there's diversity in contribution. There are diversity in people, diversity in contribution. People contribute in so many different ways. And there has to be equity and equality in observing contribution. And finally, I think go short time, right? Okay. What is a musician having? Why is a musician having this conversation? Conclude with that because I'm going to sing. You know, I always get this very often. It's like, can you just sing and not speak and write? And I have different answers for it. I'm not going to give you one today. But it's an interesting question. Because I think maybe there are two impressions coming from that question. Leave me personally aside from it. One impression is that somehow art or music by itself does something. By its very existence, many people would believe by its very existence, by what could be, some may call an elevating experience, some may call a divine experience, whatever you may call it, that's up to you, that very experience itself is enough. It moves me. I'm touched. That in a way is above all this, isn't it? Why should you speak about this? This could be one kind of an explanation. The other kind of explanation is very simple. This is not your job. Very simple. This is very simple. But, I am not one who believes art by itself does magic. I think that magic has great limitations. It has its momentary specialness, if you want to call it. Of course it does, I won't deny it. But as an artist, for me to believe that somehow just because I sing and I have the ability to communicate music in a certain manner, there is something profound that is happening constantly, is a blatant lie. Art comes from a lot of ugliness too. If I tell you what happens on stage between four of us, you will know. Like my colleagues are there on stage here with me. It's at a very practical level, it's not all hunky-dory on stage. So art comes from a lot of what in normal life you will call negativity. Sometimes even unhappiness. It comes from a place of even disrespect for somebody or the other. So for me, I can't be putting out this facade of beauty when I am engaging in what is fundamentally a very, very disturbing environment, and disturbing relationship. So if art really needs to transcend, if art really needs to move beyond its own ugliness, and I say this loudly, art's own ugliness, art itself has to be challenged. Its beauty itself needs to be challenged. We have to ask questions about what we think is beautiful. Just like we have limitations in the way we grew up and what people we can. Music and artists have exactly the same limitations. Please remember, we're not special human beings. What we think is beautiful to our ear, what we think is ugly to our ear, what we think is, within quotes, good music, is all already choreographed. not going to be robust in asking those questions about our own art form, or me, my own art form, or the world of art, then I also believe somewhere that I'm doing charity to society. I also present art as saying, see, you come to my concert and I make you all better people. I'm also like that person who believes that by writing the check they've done more. And I also think I'm giving back to society. Every one of those things I challenged in the last half an hour, I become, unless I see art itself for what it is, which is a very complicated relationship between what we consider beautiful and what we consider ugly. And again, without going to binaries, can remain acutely aware of our own limitations as human beings and participate in the larger discourse of embracing society. Thank you very much.